I believe in a fast-moving, tight interview process, a recruiter screen, hiring manager, one round and then a final round. As long as you and I need to decide there's a match.
If somebody doesn't use AI now, they should be shot, right? But I think there's a difference between throwing it into ChatGPT versus having tooling that actually does the work for you and is more involved.
Are you using AI to outsource your thinking? Or are you using AI to think more deeply? Anecdotally, I have not heard a bunch of CMOs saying, I just fired a bunch of people. I have not heard that.
Do you have a favorite interview question?
If you had a magic wand and could craft the perfect next gig that had you happy to go to work every day, was the right next thing for your resume, irrespective of this discussion, what's that job look like?
Welcome to How I Hire, the podcast where we talk with senior go-to-market leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow new talent. I'm Andy Mowat, founder of Whispered. Today, I'm joined by Guy Yalif. Guy, great to see you.
Great to see you too, Andy.
Yeah, I've known you since my 20s, which has been awesome. Guy is the chief evangelist at Webflow, where he gets to spend deep time with some of the sharpest marketing leaders on how marketing is evolving. Guy is also a co-founder of an AI website personalization platform called Intellimize that I loved, he sold to Webflow. Before that, Guy was a marketing leader at Twitter, Yahoo, and Brightroll. And from the Princeton days, he's a former aerospace engineer / rocket scientist. Guy, welcome. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I did what so many CMOs have done, right? Straight line from aerospace engineer to CMO. That's like the normal path.
I love it. So you probably are great at using data to think through how to evaluate hires, marketing, and all that follows.
I think CMOs have changed quite a bit during the time you and I have been working, where there are a lot more data-driven CMOs, and brand still hugely important, but the application of data is just different than it was before.
I agree, and we're still seeing it all blown up again, right? Attribution used to be powerful, and it's like the old days of marketing attribution may completely change. Well, maybe to kick it off, you probably, if anyone I know in marketing, have a front row seat on how AI is changing marketing. You get to talk, your whole job is talking to people about that. I'd be curious, how do you see AI changing the construction of marketing teams?
Widely varying at the moment. 65% of marketing leaders we surveyed said AEO, I know you asked about AI. The specific piece on AEO is causing them to change their content strategies. And overall, I don't think we're going to not have like a content team or a demand gen team. I think the way we staff them is changing or will change. In my mind, there's like this evolution that I observe, not quantitative. This is purely subjective, with half a dozen levels where we start with like, are you allowed to touch AI at all? And you get sort of legal and security and privacy getting comfortable. From there, you go to, hey, everybody go use these, which I think is great advice because it's hard to really wrap your head around the new use cases you can unlock with it without playing with it. Then there's sort of targeted play where everyone's reminded the goal is to go build brand and drive demand. So play with that in mind. And from there, at least I see folks saying, all right, I'm going to automate some of my work. And I see a lot of folks there now where they're saying, I created this custom GPT or this gem, and that's helping me do things more quickly. Awesome. Then you can automate to superhuman levels. I wrote this prompt to go assess AEO maturity of websites. I'm now running that on 10,000 sites. No way I could have done that manually. And the highest level, which frankly, I don't think I've seen folks do yet, because I don't think we're collectively there, is literally changing how you work, changing the job descriptions, changing what you're hiring for. I see everyone hiring for AI experience now, but that level of change, I haven't seen much of. Have you?
I think everybody wants people that are AI fluent. The people that I've seen some of these interview processes where they're really, especially at a couple of the top AI companies, where they're literally going to say, explain to me what RAG is. How do you do this? And I warn people before they go to those interviews. So if you need to be prepared, I think there's, like, as you said, there's multiple levels of AI fluency out there. There's I throw stuff into everyone. If somebody doesn't use AI now, they should be shot, right? But I think there's a difference between throwing it into ChatGPT versus having tooling that actually does the work for you and is more involved, right? Like I'm sure you guys are building that at Webflow. You obviously built it in Telemize as well too. And so I think there's so many different levels. And if you have to click down 2 or 3 levels to really understand, like, do you get AI or do you just know how to like throw stuff in?
I'm with you. And I think one of the key things to discern in hiring and in general, as you know, kindergartners through to CEOs need to learn this whole new thing is, are you using AI to outsource your thinking? Or are you using AI to think more deeply?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're naming this often enough, but I hear people worrying on podcasts, hey, there's a generation of folks graduating college who are going to be unemployable because they're doing this one. And you see people, doing this one and doing superhuman, amazing, awesome things that are hugely value add. And you can't tell from the outside, right? The human being looks the same, but it makes such a difference.
It does. It does. I mean, like I've gotten a chance with Whisper to build it fully AI first. And I'm learning that how you build prompts changes, how they all have to work together. And so it's I don't think people really respect it. And I see this whole new wave of AI and enabled tools. I mean, you're sitting there building them at Webflow. We're sitting on Wix right now, and I'm thinking through, okay, I have to rebuild my website. So you and I are going to talk a lot.
Can make that easier for you.
I know. And I was talking to a guy today. I was like, how do you look at it, and what do you need, and how? Because historically, and I don't want to go too deep on this, but like Webflow was said is hard or not easy. One of the values I have as a fully AI is I can go change my website today on Wix. And with Webflow, it's a little scary, but I think that can all change. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Humbly submitted. Your view, I think, may have reflected years ago when it was and remains an excellent tool for designers. Now for the mere mortal marketer who is not a design expert, but has a point of view on design, of course, it's a whole lot easier to use. And there's AI built in throughout in your existing workflows, asking us questions we're good at answering, being brand aware, tuned to the task at hand. It's a great experience. I invite you to go take a look.
I'm going to be diving in soon. Well, let's shift over. How do you think AI, are there more people in market? I've heard this asked of a lot of engineering leaders, CTOs at AI companies, of like, how many engineers do you use, and what's percentage of your code is done, and will you use more engineers? And almost inevitably they say, yes, we will. But I'm curious, like, will there be more marketers, less marketers in this new AI-enabled world? And then obviously marketing uses a lot of fractional work historically, right? People will use fractional. Does that change? Is it more or less fractional? So how do you think the dynamics and design of a marketing team change? And then we'll shift over to executive hiring, but I'm curious what you've been thinking about there.
I'm curious what you've heard. In my opinion, it's a business choice. If you can now be more efficient and hopefully more effective at the same time, you can take the same number of people and deliver more, or you can deliver the same amount with fewer people. And I think that is a choice for each business to make. Anecdotally, I have not heard a bunch of CMOs saying, oh, I just fired a bunch of people. I have not heard that. I have heard a lot of, wait, you want to hire someone else? Help me understand why we can't do that with AI, why we can't be more efficient. And so I've heard some there. Over time, yeah, we can get more done with the same number of humans, I believe. And I believe that's been the case every advancement that we've had to date. So I don't think that concept is a new one, and what we do with it is business specific.
I agree with everything you said. I think historically marketing's been one of the most challenging to lead, because with sales, you may have 100 people in the team and they all basically do 2 or 3 jobs. With marketing, you've got one design, a couple PMMs, you've got some SEM, you've got some SEO, and every single one of those marketing teams has their own little tool, which is why you hear that 10,000 tools for marketing. And it's scary. I do see this world where there are less silos in tools, one stack, everyone working off of the same data. And because it's much more about like, there's like less like little tiny platforms, I think it could change things. And maybe that makes it easier to be a marketing leader. I think it's one of the hardest jobs is not just how do you deal with the CEO and how do you drive demand, but also how do you lead these incredibly complex teams. And so I think that is hopefully maybe it'll make it a little bit easier with AI.
I think you touch on something that is key in hiring, especially marketing leaders, where, to your point, it's a function with many different specialties. And as a CEO hiring a CMO or a marketing leader hiring, leaders, I think you need to be clear on what's someone's wheelhouse. Where did they grow up in marketing? There are many ways to divide it up. I think about it as 4. Do they come from product marketing, where it's sort of messaging, positioning, value prop, customer insight, and or launching products? Demand gen?
Yep.
Often has great skills in paid, may have organic SEO in there too. Comms, and then brand. And those 4, yes, you could slice up content separately. You could slice up organic traffic separately. You could slice up events separately, activations. In my mind, I think about those 4 as the primary when you're hiring execs. What's their wheelhouse? And then what do you need in your org right now? And are they of a mindset that they will then happily hire people better than them at any one of those, especially the ones where they're not quite as strong, to go help flesh out, the strength of the team, round out the team?
I love how you did the 4. I've always said the 3. I didn't have comms as a separate bucket, but it does make sense, right? Because it doesn't.
If you were going to merge 2, it'd be comms and brand. Totally with you.
Yeah. Which is the hardest of those 4 to hire for?
I think I'm biased, but I would say product marketing, because I think good and bad product marketing, I think it's actually like good and bad AI engineers, data scientists. It takes a long time to find out if they are good or bad, because it takes a while for the crank to turn, for you to go out, gain market insight, shift your messaging, bake that in, activate it throughout. The cycle time is long, and great doesn't look all that different from good, but the impact is so huge. And I think I'm biased because I went from aerospace engineer to 10 years building and leading product teams to my wheelhouse in marketing is product marketing. To me, pervasive market needs that somebody's going to pay you for, that's true north. Like, everything may ladder up to brand, but everything is built on the problem you're going to solve for somebody that they're willing to pay you for. And in my mind, that can live in many places. I think it lives in product marketing. And so I have directly experienced having had a tougher time, but maybe that's my bias because I've got that bar. The one last thing I'll say is I feel like also product marketing, somewhat like the other ones, you could use the same word to mean 2 totally different things, right? There are folks that are like inbound product marketing, which stereotypes to be a little more strategic, a little more market listening, a little more what's the value prop, and folks that are outbound product marketing, which is a little more about how do I launch this product? How do I do these integrated, messages across all the different touch points that we have with customers? Those are 2 very different things, both called product marketing. How does all that land for you?
I deeply agree with you that product marketing to me would definitely be the hardest to hire for because it's not my superpower. I think your point on long time to figure out is so accurate, right? Like, I can sit a demand gen person, you can sit them in 3 meetings and understand, do they understand it? And do they know how to work with sales? I think brand, it's a special mind. And when you find and very few companies are willing to invest enough in brand, but when they do, I love it. And it's so fuzzy and so there. And plus brand, the CEO relationship is so critical. But I think you're probably right on PMM. It's like you could have a bad one there for a very long time. They could spend a lot of time shuffling the wrong pieces of paper, right? Of prioritizing how product releases happen instead of, or trying to get feedback back versus just fundamentally helping you explain what you do. We had a lot of fun at my last company. It's like, you have to take that. I always spend time thinking through everything on the website. If it could describe another competitor, isn't unique enough. Right? When we did gated, someone came up with your, what was it? The noise canceling headphones for email. I was like, amazing. It can be remembered, right? And it whispered, it's your next role. It won't be posted. It'll be whispered. And it's like those succinct phrases, when you say them, will just like stand out. What was yours at Intellimise, Guy? What was that? How did you define and describe the company when it was like right before you sold it?
We optimized the world's buyer journey.
Wow. That is powerful.
That was the goal of the company, and the mechanics were to the name Intellimise was intelligently optimize your website.
You did a great job of incorporating AI. It was so impressive. We could do a whole podcast episode on that one for sure. Maybe shifting from just general marketing and strategy to, you've been head of marketing, you've also been CEO, and now you're back at a bigger company. Like, how is hiring different from that senior leadership hiring at a startup company versus a bigger company?
The title may be the same, but the job is totally different. VP marketing at Salesforce is completely different than VP marketing at Webflow, is completely different than VP marketing at Intellimise. And to look for people who ideally have been at both, so that you've got the stereotypical scrappiness and grit and hunger of a startup, and the stereotypical, and I'm saying stereotypical because by definition doesn't apply to everybody, but big company, hey, I've seen it done really well. And somebody who brings both, I think, is ideal. And then make sure they are ready for your stage, for where you are. I had a non-marketing leader that I had the privilege of working with at Intellimise that had some time in larger firms and smaller firms, and it was just coming from a larger firm. And I thought, hey, here's a startup person who did a round or two at larger firms, and their next job was see something at a Fortune 500 company, and their muscle memory was more along the lines of take one roll and slice it up and put people on each, which is perfect at scale, was probably a little bit early for where we were. And that was very much thinking, oh, here's somebody who really wants to be in startup land. And they did. They very much did. I would have gone through the same hiring process again, but in retrospect, their self-discovery was more big company, which is one dimension among many that change between 75 person Intellimise and an 800 person Webflow and how many tens of thousands Salesforce.
How do you, by the way, I love your big company and seeing what's great and then grit. I use that all the time. And those are, I think if you've just been big company, I would really question if you're ready for that, for the early stage. How did you evaluate when you were at Intellimise? Were people ready for your stage?
Listening to the answers they gave to questions. You ask a question, you hear the altitude at which they respond. I listen for like we in, I don't like too much oh wait, are they glory absorbing rather than like, I'd prefer somebody to be glory reflecting and blame absorbing. And if it's all did they really do much of it themselves? I also just ask very directly, in the very earliest stages, you're hiring a VP who's going to have no direct reports. And to say that, and to say, I would explicitly say, once we got to know each other some, hey, if this is a necessary evil until you can hire a team, this may not be the right role, depending on the growth trajectory that you have. Blind references, I think, are an absolute must. I have dogmatic belief in their value, and I think that is a great way to understand if somebody's ready for those different stages. By the way, on blind references, I also think you need to take things in perspective. There's an exec I hired at Intellimise who ended up being great, where made it all the way through the process. And I think their third blind reference, yes, I go overboard on them, was really bad, like really bad. And so I went and did 4 or 5 more and realized the person who said that, they were the problem. Actually, it wasn't the person I was considering hiring. And in the end, that potential misfire of not finding a match was avoided. But those are some of the things that come to my mind. How about you?
By the way, I love some of your questions. We could probably dig into a bunch. I think the altitude they respond is such an interesting one that I'd love to dig into. For me, references are important, and I have a couple follow-up questions there. Maybe talk to me a little bit more about the altitude they respond question. That one's really interesting to me. Is it, and then you also, I think when we were preparing for it, talked about the consistency of the storyline that you had as well too. So I'd be curious, like, I think the questions you're asking and what you're listening for are really good, but how do you assess the altitude that they respond? Is that just the we, or are there anything else you're looking for in as well too?
In my mind, the we is a related but separate thing. The altitude was, you ask about X and do they answer with, here's how we built the spreadsheet. and here's how we tracked, the metrics week on week? Or do they answer with, here were the market dynamics and here was the impact that had on the business, or somewhere in between? That's the altitude I mean. And that, I think, sheds a lot of light on often their last role or the role that they're in right now, and the muscle memory that they will come with. And if they're answering at an altitude that isn't matching the role, I'll often ask them, great. And then I'll ask a follow-up, not to change altitude, but like, can you address X, Y, and Z, and see how they do, see where they go, see where they have depth, what flows easily. And on the consistency of storylines, I think there are a couple of things, at least to me. One is literally consistency. Mm-hmm. Occasionally you'll have someone who tells the same story with different data to different folks. And in my mind, that's sort of, bright red flag. And the other one is that is more practical, is the variety of examples, because sometimes you'll realize they really only have one or two great examples. And that may be okay because you're looking for an up and comer, or it may not be okay because you want somebody who's got more battle scars, has made more mistakes, has seen things done well and not well more often. And I think that can be telling. I think there are many other angles to it, but those are the ones that come to mind for me.
I like that a lot. I think the same story, different ways is a very scary one. The variety of stories is really an interesting one that I never really looked into, because that's actually looking at all the interviews and then circling up on them to be able to say, okay, did they tell the same story, and did they tell the same? I've actually caught people in the first one at the literal differences before, but I think it's like, I've seen those people where they kind of stay at this high level and they can kind of like survive, and they may only have like one story at a place. And so if they can offer multiple, that does become valuable. Wow. Okay. I love that consistency of stories idea. I'd never heard that one before, but everyone's always prep through 2 talk tracks, but the ability to go out and do that third one and that fourth one. Another way that maybe you can catch that too is, I find hiring managers in particular will spend 3 or 4 hours with somebody, right? So you can even get that, God, I'm hearing the same example used to illustrate this or that or the other thing too many times. And then you realize they didn't really go deep. They were just kind of a paper pusher instead.
To your point, 2 things that you made me think about, in particular for execs, on the 3 to 4 hours, I believe in a fast moving, tight interview process, varying degrees of success in having that actually happen. But, a recruiter screen, hiring manager, 1 round and then a final round. And mm-hmm. But then I will say, in particular for an exec, after that, it's as long as you and I need to decide there's a match, where that's really intentionally open-ended for both when you're talking exec hiring. The other thing is something I learned at Brightroll from the hiring team there that I've used since, which is a sim. That's a made-up name for a simulated meeting. We would do it for every single role, and it was tuned to the role. The hiring manager would create it, and it's intended to be what's it like to work together with this person? Let's spend half an hour. Typically it was an hour. For an exec, it might be even longer, talking through a real life scenario to understand how they think about it. And you would then find, were those high level things that they said in the interviews, which made great sense in the interviews, is there depth behind them? And in fact, I found sim prep, which is candidate and hiring manager, almost more revealing, because I would say to them, hey, come with half-baked ideas. Looking silly in the sim, that's a problem. Looking silly in the prep, that's not a problem at all, right? Imagine, you started, this is day 2, and we're sitting right next to each other. You're just leaning over. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? To encourage active discussion, because you then really, you do get to see how people synthesize and think and react. Or was this all just high level platitudes a little bit? Do you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean. I always say, after I've had 3 one-on-ones, I know if I made a good hire or a bad hire. And if you could actually replicate 1 or 2 of those one-on-ones in advance with this sim concept, it's really interesting. Okay, so break down the sim for me for a second. It's like, it sounds like you give them an assignment. Do they then take it home and prep for it, or does it all happen right there? How do you think about the sim?
The way I've been doing it, based on what I experienced at Brightroll, and then tuned slightly, You come up with a meaningful thing that they can go do on their own.
Mhm.
You tell them, this is post NDA, you tell them, hey, I'll tell you basically anything you want. Not literally, but basically. For a marketing leader, it might be, hey, we're struggling with this issue. How would you diagnose it and do it? And I think, a standard one is tell me about your first 90 days, given everything you know about us. Another one might be, hey, what should our next storylines out in market be? Why? How would you activate them? Or I've had roles where product marketing would be a good example. You really need depth on the product and the customer to do that well. So I would say, forget that. Let's use your current company. Don't share any inside baseball. We're not looking for secret sauce, but walk through this set of questions for the thing you already know really well. And then I would give them, I'd say, you choose when we have the sim itself. But if you're asking, about a week is typical. If you say, hey, I'm ready tomorrow, you may not be giving it enough time. And if you need 2 or 3 weeks, you're probably putting too much time into it. The goal is not to get free work at all. The goal is to understand how you think. And then I would say, lean on me, use me as much or as little as you want. And it's the one time where I'd be like, ping me off hours, weekend.
Oh,
because I know you're working a full-time job.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. To ask the questions. And then as the hiring manager, one, you get to help them. Two, you really get to see how they think.
Okay, so this all makes sense. How is it different than a case study?
You could call it a case study,
Okay.
a tailored case study where the other thing we would say is, it's just a normal business meeting. If, for example, often folks would create slides to help facilitate the discussion. And I would be explicit. If the slides aren't pretty, don't care. If the slides are unintelligible, okay, that's a problem. But the point is high signal to noise. So whatever's going to help us have a better discussion, focus on that rather than the fine trimmings of something, looking great. Does that make sense?
It does. I think the biggest difference I picked up on the case study is you actually want them to be dialoguing with you in the middle. A lot of times people they're like, here it is, have fun. We'll see you in a conference room in 4 days. But with you, you're like, no, you're creating that openness where people can come back and forth. And frankly, I think you're going to learn a lot in that prep process that you wouldn't otherwise learn. So I really like that. I think for me, I guess where I also went with this was I always think that there are some standard meetings in companies, right? So there's the SDRs meeting with the demand gen team. There's the sales manager meeting with their directs to review calls. And so I've sometimes tried to simulate those meetings, right? When we were hiring a head of enablement, we just gave her 5 calls and said, break them down. We want to talk about these calls. And so for me, I think if I can turn it away, I personally don't like case studies. I feel like I don't learn much in them, but your prep concept kind of helped me kind of parse out why don't I like them and what am I really trying to learn from a case study? Because case studies now, especially, you could just gamify them with ChatGPT, right? It's you're going to do 95% of the work. And a lot of people don't hate them because they've phoned them in. But what I really want to find is what's a meeting where I can replicate as best as possible, how you work when you're uncomfortable. And so I think the prep part is an interesting concept there.
Couldn't agree with you more. SDR leaders, we would do exactly that. We would do a coaching call. We'd say, our VP of sales would pretend to be an SDR and ask the SDR leader to listen to a pretend call that he or she, happened to be he in that particular case, would go pretend to do, and then ask the SDR leader for feedback on it as much as they could, given what they knew. To your point, the case studies are very much intended to be practical, applied, based on what folks really know and experience. The more made up it is, the worse it is. The more not connected to day to day, the less useful it is as a screen. Because to your point, then people are putting on a performance rather than having a real normal business discussion.
Yeah, what you seem to have captured in your sim is text me anytime. And if they don't ask you any questions, that in and of itself is a bad sign, right?
Especially if you follow up several times offering. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's how do you write one in a way where there's unknown information and all of that stuff. I like that
for a CSM. We would early on, I remember we would take screenshots of real customers' data, obfuscate all of it so they could have no idea who the customer was, but it was realistic. And so this anonymized data, we'd say, hey, take a look at this. What do you see? What's going well with this customer? What's not? Especially for folks who'd worked for competitors, because then like we'd see, oh, hey, do you go dial in on that set of things that are impactful here?
I feel like so many people phone in, the company side phone in the case studies, right? They're like, we'll just do this one. And it's not that great. I feel like that could be an opportunity to use AI that people haven't thought of, right? Like I remember one time, forget where it was, but they gave us this fun exercise and they're like, half of you, you're each going to work in pairs with somebody else, and half of you are going to have this instructions, half of you are going to have this. And basically what they said was, you need the orange because you need the orange peel and it has this special sauce in it. And the other one was like, you need the rind. And like 1 out of like 20 teams figured out that they could actually share the orange, right? And it's like, what could you come up with in case studies that would actually teach you how people are going to interact versus a lot of the, as you said, the performative stuff. So I think there's something there that people haven't really thought through yet, especially when I'm hearing more and more people aren't doing case studies just because they're going to use like the Cluely AI to cheat on them. So on blind references, is that just backdoor references, or because I love how you've got different unique terms for all these things, which may subtly mean different things. Like, what does blind references mean to you? Like, does that mean you don't ask them for permission, or what does it mean on that side?
To me, it means it's somebody the candidate did not introduce us to. And before I do those, I will, which I don't think many companies do, but I will ask the candidate, hey, we're at this late enough stage. I'd like to do blind references. I don't want to mess with your job. What's off limits? I presume everybody at your current company is off limits. How about, what else is off limits? To make sure we're aligned, because I don't want, God forbid, if something makes it back to the company, that should never come from me or my team.
I like that. One other thing I always add to it is there anybody that I shouldn't reach out to? And oftentimes the candidate will offer up somebody else that they know would be a bad reference. Remember when you were saying how there's that one guy where you did the 3. And so if they're willing to explain to me why that reference might not be a good one, I'm willing to offer. I mean, I'll still ask about it to the other people in interesting ways. I'll be like, oh, interesting. Like Susie, I know she worked with Bob and Jack and Sue, and maybe Bob's the one you're like watching out for. And so, how did Susie work with Bob? So I'll still get to it, but I can learn more, I find, by asking if there's somebody else they want to avoid.
That's great advice. In fact, that person I gave an example earlier, months after this person had started, if somehow the topic of references came up and they said, oh, well, of course you didn't talk to so-and-so. And I was like, no, I did. And they're like, you still hired me? I'm like, yeah. And then I explained to them, talking to other people.
Yeah, there was one person that you called and asked. It was 2 jobs ago or 3 jobs ago, but it wouldn't have been a good one because I didn't respect them and they didn't respect me, right? And so, or maybe they didn't respect me because I didn't respect them. So I think that there's interesting ones there, and then there are just bad bosses who are out to get you in some ways. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have a favorite interview question?
I mean, there's not one magical one. You know what? If you had a magic wand and could craft the perfect next gig that had you happy to go to work every day, was the right next thing for your resume, irrespective of this discussion, what's that job look like?
Wow, that's people are going to be very cautious when they answer it, but you're going to learn something, right? It's like, you can't not answer that question, and you can't say this perfect job exactly like it exists now. So you're going to learn like what's the one dimension that you haven't asked about or they haven't revealed before.
I'm with you. Most of the time you learn a lot. And if they are regurgitating what you currently have as the discussion at hand, sometimes that comes with actually not regurgitation at all, genuine, heartfelt, like this is what I've been looking for. And sometimes it comes with, okay, this feels just rote. And that teaches you something too.
Yes. At the executive level in particular, you don't want the road or to dialed it in. And I like that one a lot.
Totally. People's energy and passion is so important because they're going to be hopefully inspiring and motivating others. And if for them, it's just another job or just a set of bullets rather than a passion, that will have a huge knock-on effect negatively.
Mm-hmm. How about employer brand, Guy? Yeah, I know you and I were talking a little bit about that one before we started recording. But you've worked at great brands, you've built great brands, you've now at another great brand. Like, how do you think employer brand plays into it? How have you invested in it?
Gosh, I think it's hugely important. And in my mind, it is the byproduct of actually living your values, actually saying, this is the culture we have, this is what's important, and then doing that. And so we had a set of values that at Intellimise, for example, the three co-founders, the first day, first morning, first thing we talked about was culture, because we had enough of, some of the Office Space, the movie, like BS in other places, and said, hey, how do we create a different environment? And then you attract other people who are attracted to that environment. And whether we made the quarter or raised another round, those were obviously important things. The thing that fed my soul was somebody saying 2 weeks after starting, thank you. You weren't lying. This really is that culture. Okay, that happened to feed my soul. It also is how you create a great employer brand, because then they will tell other people, no, this is the real deal. And we were blessed to then have that recognized quantitatively as a great place to work. Every year we tried for it, and to be Inc. 5000 and Inc. Best Place to Work at the same time, that was an incredible privilege, reflecting the amazing team that we had there that was aligned on that culture and sought it out. And then it became its own thing. People reinforced it and lived it and sought it out in others.
I love that. You've got to be that keeper of it, and the things can't conflict. I think I liked what you said around, gosh, you didn't lie about X, right? Like, I think so many candidates experience that. I probably talk to one a week, which is what I just signed on for was, like maybe people are like, I didn't sign up for Whisper, but, I'm calling you back a month later because what I just signed on for wasn't what I thought I was getting. And we try as best we can to help people figure that out in advance, or assess that, or ask the right questions. What can be some good questions, maybe some like perceptive questions that candidates have asked you to kind of try to suss out that, or, maybe like, whoa, I didn't think about that, or that was a really good one. Any questions that you love candidates to ask you? And I think you said at one point here, we're going to go as long as you and I need to decide. Have there been any bad questions where people can take themselves out too?
I think folks asking management style is a very safe and revealing one, because they can see, do I or others they're asking the question of answer it superficially, deeply? You can say a lot about how much you've thought about that. That can tell you, are culture and values important? Or is this, an org that runs differently? I think another one is, to candidly ask, at the stereotype level, by definition, doesn't apply to everybody. Is this a sales org, a product org, an engineering org, a finance org? Like, company, not org, but like whole company. What leads the charge? I think can be very revealing.
I feel like a lot of people have not articulated that themselves when they get asked. And most people don't ask it, they kind of try to intuit. But I think it could be revealing if you ask that question and see what a CEO says.
To your point, I think the most important questions, what is gnawing at you, frankly, either the candidate or the hiring manager? What's gnawing at you? What are you worried about? What's articulate your scary story. Andy, I am worried that you're going to do blah when you're here. Guy, I'm worried that you like to create an org like this, or you think that thing. Like, say it out loud. It's so much cheaper and easier to voice that vulnerably, openly in the interview process than to have the follow-on discussion a month later like you're having.
I love that. At the same time, I think you could also set off the impression of, wow, this person's trying to minimize risk in this process, and I just need them to take that plunge. And so have there ever been questions where people have asked you and you've been like, ooh, like, it's like, let me take a step back and see, is this really the right person?
Because you said question, basically the answer is no. In my mind, sharing a scary story, however scary or not it might appear to me, it's scary to them.
Uh-huh.
I think that's great. When you voice a zillion of them, then that's where my head might go to where you were going. And I feel like sometimes comp negotiations end up having this element to them. And when it starts getting to that point, I will often ask, what's your scary story? How did somebody break your trust in the past? And then you'll get a sense of, Is this a specific scenario that you can hopefully just, work in and address that scenario, which has been the case almost every time for me. And I'm like, great, that's a narrow scenario. I'm confident that's not going to happen. Let's do the thing that we need to do to get you, the candidate, comfortable with that. And occasionally it is, no, they really are so risk averse. This may not be right for this stage. At IntelliMy stage, at Salesforce stage, that may or may not be the right thing, depending on the kind of unit you're at, right? If you're optimizing the next 1% of some process, that may be perfect.
Dude, I love the calling out. How did somebody hurt you, right? Like, because we've all been hurt in some way. I think that, what is your scary story? Like, how did you hurt? Like, let's just talk about it. That is so powerful. Because I think, and then you're right, there are those people that it's not one. It's like, I just don't want to make a mistake, and they're afraid to. There's something deeper there, right? Like, there's another reason that role hasn't resonated with them. Well, I know this is amazing, man. Some of the ways you've got like perceptive, you can see the matrix with how people are hiring in some ways, which I'm impressed with. How, maybe as we wrap it, like, how do you make a new hire successful? And then I think you mentioned earlier, how do you know when to cut bait if it's not the right hire?
On the new hire successful, I try, and often fail, but try to put myself in their shoes and try to forget all the context that I have. By definition, if you're hiring somebody, you almost certainly have a boatload of context. And two, try to be ultra empathetic on the fire hose that they are almost certainly drinking from when they start, including all the made up language, even though it's a tiny little thing, like the made up language is such an impediment. I will schedule with them daily one-on-ones for the first week, and then a couple times a week for a few weeks, and then go to weekly after that. And I'll let them choose, like, no, I want more, I want less. And I'm like, I don't need these with you. I'm offering these to you so that you can ask the dumb questions, so that you can just get up to speed faster. I also will prepare, like, hey, here's a set of things I think you need to know. These you can go read. These we're going to go talk about together. But I think it's really time and intention, which is so hard because you're hiring somebody because you were short on time, because you needed more capacity, and you just got done with this huge effort of hiring them. And so it can be very tempting to be like, oh, Joe or Jane is here, off they go. And the cut bait, I think like everyone can point to too many times where I waited too long. And I think being open, vulnerable, transparent is the way to go, so that if you are ever cutting bait, no one's surprised. They're like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Like, yeah, this isn't quite working out. And that's scary, especially early on, because you don't want them to think, oh, you're leaping to judgment before they get a chance to do something. But like, to be really clear, just what are your expectations? And for them to be able to say, I think that's unreasonable. I think that's too fast or too high or too whatever it might be. Or I need X, Y, or Z to achieve that. I can do that, but I need X, Y, or Z. Rather than letting time pass, time is the enemy. The open communication helps either drive them to be very successful, hopefully, or to mutually agree you're going to part ways. The failure mode, I think, is waiting, silently having something eating at the pit of your stomach, and then saying something that feels obvious to you and is a surprise to them. That's failure.
I 100% agree. This is amazing. We could go on for hours, but I realized we just ran out of time. Thank you so much for this session. I'm excited to keep chatting on so many levels, guy.
Andy, love talking with you always. Thank you for the insightful conversation. Look forward to talking more.